Welcome back to Inside Politics. Our guest today is Linda Peek-Schatt. She's the founding director of the Nelson and Sue Andrews Institute for Civic Leadership at Lipscomb University. Linda, you have personal experience in the area of presidential transitions. You were involved in the transition for both the incoming presidency of Jimmy Carter from President Gerald Ford back in 1980, and then also from 1976, I should say, and then in 1980, the transition from President Carter to Ronald Reagan. Have you ever seen anything like this? I mean, there are a lot of hard feelings very often over presidential campaigns, but this sort of goes well beyond anything like that.
That's right. Nobody likes to lose, but in the case of the Gerald Ford administration and the transition to the Carter team, that went very, very smoothly and happened very quickly. I remember being called the week after the election to move to Washington and move into the offices that were provided for the transition there. So by now, the transition should be positioned in the government offices. But the interesting thing is that in this year of the pandemic, the Biden team doesn't really need government offices because everybody is working from home. And they are raising privately the funds to pay for the staff in the transition. And they can find what they need on domestic policy from the public information, for whether it's health and coronavirus or the economy. But the big thing, as we discussed earlier, is that foreign policy transition. And that went very smoothly between Ford and Ford and Carter. And then it went equally smooth between Carter and the Reagan administration, because Carter, as you may remember, conceded early in the night of the election, and then very quickly moved to begin to work with the Reagan administration. Now, I'm not going to say they weren't hard feelings. I mean, I remember a lot of sessions in the White House and over over beers, I guess I can say that on Inside Politics, but a lot of hurt feelings, particularly about the way that Jimmy Carter lost the race, because as you remember, that was the beginning of the moral majority and the union between the Republican Party and evangelicals. And while he had won them in 1976, he lost white evangelicals in 1980.
Coming back to the area of foreign policy in 2020, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said this week that he's looking forward to a smooth transition to a second Trump administration. That doesn't seem to be the way things are actually headed. What kind of message does the Secretary of State say that? What does that send to the rest of the world and to foreign governments, both our allies and our enemies?
Well, as the top American diplomat and really the senior cabinet member, as the Secretary of State is in any cabinet, it's unnerving to have him reject what appears to be the will of the people and the numbers that have made Joe Biden president-elect. It doesn't seem to be affecting some of the world leaders who are calling to congratulate Joe Biden. It does, however, undermine the fact that we are viewed in the world, at least we have been, as the gold standard of democracy. I think it's interesting that Pope Francis also called Joe Biden this week. And as someone who worked in the Senate when Joe Biden was a senator, I can tell you that his Catholic faith is extremely important to the way that he governs and the way he lives his life. And I know that that was a call that was especially meaningful to him.
There's a Reuters poll this week that's been reported by the Washington Examiner, which is not part of the mainstream media, at least not a liberal bastion. The poll finds that 79% of voters surveyed believe Joe Biden won the election, and that includes 60% of Republicans. Given those numbers, how does the president and the Republicans continue to say that he didn't win the election, won't even recognize that Joe Biden's president-elect?
Well, again, I think that the whole position of the Republican leadership is based on one thing, and that is the runoffs in Georgia that will give us the control of the Senate, either for the Republicans or for the Democrats. And so I think the reason that GOP leaders are undermining the idea of a fair election, while still not saying that Donald Trump won the election, is that they need to keep the Trump base fired up in Georgia. That's why I don't think you'll see them saying that Joe Biden is president-elect until closer to the Electoral College, or maybe even after the Electoral College meets.
In addition to setting up his own legal defense fund, the president's also setting up his election PAC for the future. Is that a way to sort of continue to have his power and control inside the Republican Party, even when he's not president? What about these ideas? He's also going to set up his own digital channel to compete with Fox, or for that matter, run again for president in 2024. You put credence in those other potential alternatives as he goes forward?
I do. I think they're all credible alternatives. I think the PAC shows that he intends to support the kind of candidates who would carry on Trumpism in the United States and really eliminate traditional Republicans in some of the races where you still have them. And I also think that he will raise money to support the 2024 race. And most important, probably, he will keep a digital platform. He, of course, has his 80 million followers on Twitter, but he also is seeing Fox as not as friendly to him as a regular platform, and will, I think, develop some kind of media operation of his own.
Linda Peek-Schatt from Lipscomb University, the founding director of the Nelson and Sue Andrews Institute for Civic Leadership, there is our guest on Inside Politics. We're talking about the continued controversy over who will be the next president of the United States. Joe Biden appears to be the president-elect. President Trump is still disputing that in the courts and recounts in other states. Back to continue our conversation with Linda after these messages.